Well, I do work with all the worship teams that you guys see in chapels. And I wanted to let you guys know how I started in leading worship and then just kind of walk through like what I see about worship and about what that means and how we try to lead worship on this campus and what you guys might be able to take away with today. Is that okay? Okay. So I was in 10th grade. Okay. I grew up in the church. And my youth pastor says, hey, the worship leader is not going to lead worship anymore. So he gave me a guitar, okay? And he said, this is how you play a G, this is how you play a C, this is how you play a D, and this is an E minor. Here's your guitar, practice these 3 songs, okay? And next week you're going to lead worship, all right? So I went home and I practiced, and I'm on my guitar, and I'm just playing away, okay? And I led the 3 songs, and it wasn't very good, okay? And fast songs were slow, and slow songs were fast, and every song was actually at the right tempo, because they're all the same tempo, right? Because it's just basically da-da-da-da-da-da-da, right? And so I learned those 4 chords, the 4 holy worship chords, right? And for about a year, all I did was songs with those 4 chords, right? Anybody relate? Anybody start leading worship like that? Okay, that's awesome, okay? So we're very similar like that, right? And you know what? In nearly all, if not all of our churches, there's a worship component. There's a musical worship component, okay? These days, all of our worship leaders, they wear skinny jeans, right? They got boots on. They got hair only on one side of their head. They got the Warby Parker rims, right? Half of them have a tattoo on their sleeve, right? But did you ever think, okay, what are we doing in musical worship? Why do we do this as a part of what we do in chapels? Why do we do this in our church services? Why do we do this as part of like our conferences? In any sort of Christian gathering, why do we do musical worship? That's what we want to talk about today. Okay, we're going to talk about one verse, okay, Romans 12:1. And more than kind of unpacking a verse, which we are going to unpack, but I want to have a heart-to-heart conversation about worship, okay? And I want to ask you guys to engage into worship in some of the ways that we are going to lay out right now, okay? And when I say worship, I know worship isn't just music, it's a lifestyle, right? But when I say worship right now, okay, for this talk, I'm going to talk about worship, meaning the musical worship parts that we do in a church service or in chapel service or something like that, kind of like we just experienced. Is that cool? All right? So I walk around campus, okay, and students stop me, okay? Students, maybe one of you guys have stopped me before, and you guys come up to me and you say, hey, you're the like chapel worship guy. And I go, yeah, that's me. And they go, hey, this morning set, it was so worshipful. And I say, worshipful, that's a great word, okay? Because that's not really a word, right? Is that a word? Worshipful. It was so worshipful. So I go, what do you mean by worshipful, okay? And they usually say one of 2 things, okay? The first things they say is that it's worshipful because, Mike, like that one guitar swell? Man, that was so good. Or that drum beat? Like Spencer, that was so good. Or that vocal harmony? It was perfect. It was so worshipful. Thanks, right? And you know what? I say, that's so awesome. I'm glad it was really worshipful. But did you catch that? Okay? We're talking about musical worship sets, but basically music equaled worship. Okay? I want to tell you guys, there's a lot more going on with music. Okay? There's a reason we use music, and I'll get into that. But I say this to all of our worship teams. The worst thing to happen to worship, you guys know what it is? The worst thing to happen to worship, I think, is worship CDs, okay? And the reason I think the worst thing to happen to worship is worship CDs is because we think it's all about the sound. We think worship is all about capturing a certain type of music, and all worship teams become are cover bands, right? And they just try to replicate Hillsong or Bethel or whoever. And then when we copy that sound well, what happens? Oh, they're so worshipful. But I actually think we're getting away from the idea of what worship is, because worship doesn't equal music. Okay, it's a lot more things, and we'll talk about that today. The second thing students say, so the first thing, hey, Mike, it was so worshipful this morning in chapel. I go, okay, great. Okay, so they tell me about worship. The second thing they usually say is they say something like, you know what, I was able to worship God because he was being so glorified in that place. And I say, that's awesome, you know? And they say, I got to express the worth of God by making much of Jesus. And you know what? I think that's the basic posture of all of our worship services, especially in the church, that God is glorified and praised because he's worthy. And I completely agree with that, okay? That is a foundational reason why we do worship, okay? But I think it's a little bit more than simply lifting up his name. I think worship, oh, whoa. How do you go backward? I think worship, okay, is more than simply God glorifying, even though that's the foundation for all we do. And we're going to talk about some more axes, okay? There's a lot more going on in what worship is, okay? So Romans 12:1 says this, and I'm just going to focus on that middle line. It says to present your bodies as a living sacrifice. And I want to unpack that in a few ways. That is Paul's definition of worship. His compact, his like, you know what, if I were to tell you what worship is in as few words as possible, it's to present your bodies as a living sacrifice. With that in mind, as we go to chapels, as we go to our churches, to conferences, to any place there is musical worship, I pray that we might more fully present our bodies as living sacrifices as we talk about this. Okay? If I were to come up with an analogy also, okay, I think worship is a lot like eating. All right? I'm a foodie, okay? I love good food. Any foodies in here? All right? This side of the room, you guys are foodies? Okay, I'm going to just stay over here, okay? All right? So foodies, all right, thanks, bro. Okay. What's your favorite food? What's your favorite food?
My favorite food?
Yeah.
All of it.
All of it. I like you. We need to hang out more, okay? So you know what? You know, I love living in LA because we've got awesome food, okay? Seriously, one of my joys in life is to try a new restaurant, okay? That is like my favorite thing, like on date night with my wife or date night with my kids or like with our family. We try to go to a new restaurant in Fullerton or in Brea. And you know what? I love everything from the hole-in-the-wall taco place, okay, to the upscale sushi place, everything in between. I love it, okay? I think worship is a lot like eating. See, in good food, okay, it's all about the ingredients, okay? You know, if you watch those chef shows, right, they say, you got to let the ingredients shine. You got to make the ingredients the star of the dish, right? And when you mask the flavor of the ingredient, you're doing a horrible job, and you are kicked out of the kitchen, right? It's about the ingredients making food taste like they're supposed to, right? Good tacos, they highlight the flavor of carne asada or al pastor. Good sushi highlights the tenderness of fish. Just so you know, I have a lot of friends in the food business. And orange is supposed to make you guys hungry, okay? That's why a lot of like food signs have orange in them. Just go look. Okay, they do, okay? See, bread, ingredients are supposed to taste like ingredients. Bread is supposed to taste like bread. You might add a little bit of butter. You might add a little bit of garlic to make the bread stand out, but you want the bread to taste like bread. You don't want bread to taste like garlic or broccoli or whatever else, right? You want the bread to be bread. Right? In a good burger, we got all the different components, all the different ingredients, and with all the different ingredients, when you complement them, because they taste like each other, it becomes this amazing dish. The hamburger, the all-American hamburger. It is like one of the best dishes ever, right? Because of all the ingredients that go in there, and you're trying to highlight what each dish is. I think worship is that. In worship, the ingredients that we're trying to highlight, there are emotions. If you look through the Psalms, you don't just find positive emotions. You don't just find songs that glorify God. You don't just find songs that are adoration or gratitude even. You don't just find the positive stuff like a lot of modern worship music is. You have a lot of negative stuff. You got despair. You got lament. You got hopelessness. You got everything on the negative side, and you got everything on the positive side. You got joy, celebration, gratitude. See, in a good worship set, what it's trying to do is to help us honestly present our bodies to God, to help us honestly process the ingredients that we're walking each day with, to honestly process our emotions from the place that we're at. Some worship leaders, and I hear this a lot, they say, hey, as you walk in the door, leave your anxieties outside because we're here to worship God. I think that's one of the worst things a worship leader can say. Because in a worship set, what we're trying to do is process those anxieties. We're trying to see, what is God doing in those anxieties? What is God doing in the everyday things of life? See, worship, it's not to be an escape from real life. It's to help us understand how God is already working in real life. Worship isn't supposed to be, I need to get to a place to meet God. It's, wait, God, you've already been working. So what does that mean? How does that look like? And you process that in a time of worship. In regards to food, chefs will say that you don't want to hide or obscure or manipulate ingredients. Okay? If I overseason broccoli, I do a bad job as a cook. Okay? If I salt and pepper a steak, put it on a cast iron, put it in the oven, it's like perfectly seared, I'm doing a good job as a cook because I let the meat shine. Different kinds of meat are supposed to taste like different kinds of meat. Too many times we approach worship as a way to manipulate and in some sense over-season our emotions, to take our negative emotions into positive emotions. Because we don't know how to process these negative emotions. These negative emotions that we don't want to deal with, we want to come to worship and make them positive things because those are fun, right? I would say even worship CDs are all this because this is marketable. Nobody wants to buy a depressing CD, right? That's why this is what worship CD is. And that's what the market's been, and that's all we do. But worship is about the whole spectrum of emotions, the ingredients that we're carrying in our lives. We're not trying to manufacture sorrow into joy. I'll tell you another one of my pet peeves. It's worship leaders who say, come on, let's go, sing it out. I hate that. Okay? And the reason is because what I'm trying to get you guys to do is to take whatever you're feeling and bring it over here. As if me singing louder or as if me let's going is going to help me access God better. That's not what I'm trying to do in a worship set. Okay? In a worship setting, I want to see and I want to be able to understand what is God doing in my life. Not, I have to get up to meet God. It's, no, God's already at work. What is happening in my heart? What is happening in my life? So, when we go to worship concerts, okay, and they're trying to sell their CDs, and they're trying to get you up, again, this stuff, it sells. That's where they'll get you up. They'll make you sing louder, right? But in general, in Biola chapels, in our churches, I think this needs to be worship. Okay? Worship needs to be we have to understand the ingredients of our hearts and learn to talk to God about all of that. Our goal is to present our bodies as living sacrifices. It's not to get up for God. It's not to manipulate our feelings. It's not to be something that we're not. It's to honestly process where we are. In the Psalms, there are raw, honest emotions. And worship is a place to process that with God in a real, unmanipulated way. See, music is really helpful, though. And music is really helpful because the most manipulative thing in the whole wide world is music, right? Okay? Plato once said, if you want me to change a culture, give me one thing. Do you know what he asked for? He asked for the music of the youth. Why? Because with the music of the youth, you're able to change people's perspectives. You're changing hearts. Music is that manipulative, right? When worship leaders lead a certain way and they're manipulating in a wrong way, it hurts me because I want to see it done well. But when worship leaders are doing it well and worship settings are done well, music is going to unloose these things that block us from our true emotions. Last year we had a university assembly, okay? So if you guys are freshmen or transfers in, there was this incident on campus where someone drew a swastika, okay, over someone's door, okay, over a black student's door. And it kind of hit us on this campus, like, oh my gosh, the racism that we see on TV, especially these days, it's real, even on our campus. And you know what? It's real. And you know what? It's like I plan for that event, and I try to be very present with the event, and I try to do a lot of things for that event because we're trying to organize everything. And it was really hard for me to feel the sorrow. But when the worship team led that morning, and they played all the minor keys, and the violin played the haunting melody, it actually helped me enter into lament, to sorrow to be sorrowful in that time. Earlier this year, we just started something called the Biola hour, okay, on Friday mornings, okay? And earlier this year, I was standing on the stage, okay? And the worship team started playing, seriously, one of the songs that I hate the most, okay? They started singing Indescribable by Chris Tomlin, okay? And I don't like that song because it just feels so monotonous, right? It just feels like, what are we doing here, right? And then they're just singing away. But then I'm there, and you know what? I just start crying. And the reason I start crying is because, you know what? I didn't want to feel the gratitude that I get to do something like the Biola hour. But it just hit me like a ton of bricks that I'm so thankful to be in a place where I get to do things that I want to do on this campus. And I was able to access my emotions, okay? Worship is a place to help address the deep emotions with God that we might not be able to access. So if glorifying God is the height access, okay, emotional honesty is the depth access. Okay, so we have height, depth. The next axis I want to talk about is width, okay, or the diversity of expressions. To the vast majority of us, if I ask you, what does worship music sound like? Most of us would describe the pop rock genre that Hillsong and Bethel have mastered, okay? Here's a problem. Not everyone in the world thinks that's what worship sounds like. If we're going to be part of the big C church, if we're going to be part of the global church, we have to broaden our vision for what worship music sounds like. Remember that student who says, it was so worshipful because of the guitar swell, the drum beat, or the vocal harmony? What were they describing to me? They're describing the pop rock genre. But you know what? Worship music is bigger than that. The pop rock genre is only a slice of the various expressions around the globe. A funny thing happens on this campus. When one of our worship teams introduce a new expression of worship, it polarizes our students. Okay? Some people love it and say, you're so awesome. And then you know what? A whole group of people hate it. Okay? A few years ago, we had a bluegrass team, not folk music, but bluegrass with like a banjo and a resonator and an accordion, like dirty, dirty bluegrass. Okay? And we had a team like that, and you know what? People love them, but then on social media we heard, dude, what are these goons doing? And we heard lots of things on social media, and it just hurt them. Okay? A few years ago, we also started a bilingual Spanish team. Okay? People loved it. Thank you. That's right. Some people loved it. And you know what? Other people on social media would be like, we live in America. How come we're not singing in English? And all I wanted to say was, guess what, guys? In California, since 2014, the majority of people are Hispanic. Okay? That's right. We have a band this year, okay? They sing songs from gospel worship leaders, okay? They sing songs from Tony Evans and Ty Tribbett. And students are already saying, you know what? They're too performance-y. They're too showy. You know what? That's what the gospel music genre is like. Modern pop music that we see on TV, Justin Bieber, all that kind of, it's derived from gospel music sensibilities. You know, gospel music, it does things better than other genres. You know what it helps me do? It helps me remember that we're all part of the body of Christ. Because you know when the vocal leader and the worship leader does all these runs and stuff, I go, that's so cool. I can't do that. But you know what? As a body, we're worshiping the same God. And you might be a different part of the body I am, but together we worship the same God. And you know what? Together, let's praise him. We're a body together. You know what? When people on stage are doing things that we don't like or we can't appreciate, you know what? Just remember that we're all part of the body worshiping the same God. They're gifted in a certain way that you might not get. But that's okay. Because that might be coming from their tradition. So the better posture is instead of tackling them or pushing them down, it's to understand and ask questions and be in a posture of openness, to present our bodies before God as living sacrifices. We worship with the big C church, the big B body of Christ, the global church. You know, some of you grew up in a church of Christ, and you come here and you go, why are there so many instruments? Okay? Some of you grew up singing with an organ, and you realize we don't even really use organs in chapel. You know, for some of you, Biola is the first place where you haven't worshiped in the church you grew up in, and it might be uncomfortable. That's okay. Come in and join the feast of worship that is here. We have a long way to go here at Biola, but our diverse worship expressions have doubled in the past few years. You probably noticed more languages being sung in chapel. We've experimented with hip-hop, dubstep, a cappella, jazz, even hula. You know, in our food analogy, diverse music, it's kind of like our place settings. The kinds of plates we use, the kind of cups we use, the utensils you use, the napkins you use, it sets the stage for the way that I intake the ingredients, okay? If I had paper plates, plastic utensils, red and white checkered, thing, right? What am I at? I'm at a picnic, right? And I might expect a sandwich or mac and cheese, okay? If I had fine china, silverware, wine glasses, cloth napkins, I'm at a nice restaurant, and I might expect a steak or a fish. You know, depending on the genre, it accesses different parts of who we are too. You know, just looking at the different kinds of cups here, we know each type of cup represents a different kind of situation. If I only drink from the first cup, number one, I get in trouble here, okay? But if I only drink from that first cup, you guys would know that something's wrong with me. If I only drink from that, you guys get it, okay? In worship, if we only take one type of food in, it's kind of like that movie Super Size Me. Did you guys watch that? Right? It's like the guy who ate McDonald's for 30 days and just got really fat and unhealthy. It's kind of like that. We're only eating a certain kind of worship, and we're missing out on how the world enjoys God through music. You know, we begin to think that our preferred worship genre is the best one, not because it really is, but because that's the only one we know. We don't take other worship genres seriously, not because they suck, but because we don't feel comfortable. You know what? At Biola, we have an amazing opportunity to present our bodies as a living sacrifice. We have an amazing opportunity to broaden our perspectives, to understand the global church for what it is. We have an amazing opportunity to understand people who might have grown up in different traditions. We have an amazing opportunity to be a living sacrifice, die to our own comforts, get out of our comfort zone, learn to worship the same God in a different way. And Biola, believe it or not, is a pretty safe place to practice this. You guys don't know who leads chapel every time, and we do that on purpose. It's so that you guys don't know what to expect in one of our teams. But as the team goes, you realize each of them are a little bit different. And they all bring different things to the table. Remember, the goal is not for you to like or dislike a certain chapel band or not like a certain style of worship. The goal here is to present yourself as a living sacrifice. Take in a different kind of worship. So we have height. Worship is to help us glorify God. We have depth. Worship is to help us process our emotions honestly. We have width, the importance of diverse genres in the Big C church. And the fourth axis is breadth. And this is talking about liturgy. Liturgy is the patterns of prayer. A quick definition of liturgy is the practices in a worship service that help us habituate our hearts to God. Sometimes we think that worship is about expression. It's about conveying my heart to God. It's about telling God of his greatness. You know, if worship were only about expression, then it would be really hard for me to worship all the time. Because I wouldn't be able to worship unless I really felt like worshiping God. And you know what? As a person who goes to chapel pretty much every day, it's really hard to worship God with my whole heart every single day. You know, worship isn't just about expressing my heart to God. Worship at its core, I think, is about formation. Okay? Worship is a spiritual discipline that calls us to present our bodies as living sacrifices wherever we are. We can worship no matter how our heart feels. And that's the most freeing thing. If I were to wait until my heart is right again, I probably would never worship. We're called to constantly present our bodies as living sacrifices in worship. Sometimes we think that worship is about that one experience we get, that one experience of God that will zap us into full obedience. And you know what? God can do that. But that's not the way that I've seen God work. The way I've seen God work is that worship is a rhythm, it's a liturgy, it's a pattern of prayer that we do over a period of time. And we learn to incorporate those patterns of prayer into our life so that we get to see how God is working in our everyday lives. Worship is about liturgy. It helps us develop practices of opening our heart to God to better relate with God every day. See, in the food analogy, liturgy is the table. It's the chairs. It's the foundation of the meal. If I had a round table, it conveys something else than a big, long, rectangle table. Whatever table it is, whatever liturgy is at in that worship set, they set a foundation for the meal of worship that I'm about to take. And liturgy, it reminds us that walking with God, it takes time. That obedience, it's not quick. It's a long obedience in the same direction. The repeated actions of worship habituate our heart to ingrain the truths of God into our souls so that we learn to walk with God every day. So next time you enter a worship setting, like maybe right after this, or at another chapel this week, or even at church this weekend, present your bodies as a living sacrifice. Enter into a conversation with God by being honest with your emotions, allowing a different kind of worship style to minister to you, and to practice the rhythms of prayer that open our hearts to God. And at the end of the worship set, the first thing we should not do is say, did I like that set? And evaluate it. Did I like that worship team? And evaluate them. The first thing we should do is, God, what are you inviting me to? God, what habits of prayer might you be asking me to carry into my everyday life? God, how are you inviting me to walk with you even this week as I leave this place? And please know, my heart in all this is that I want you guys to cultivate a life of worship so that you know how to experience that here at Biola, but also in church afterward. Can I tell you a secret? Most likely when you leave Biola, okay, eventually you're going to come to a church where you just can't stand the worship music. Maybe you go to a church like that now, okay? And you're just not, it's just not up to par. And you just know, oh man, their singing is bad, and like that guitar is bad, and it's always out of tune and whatever, right? Well, you know what? That's kind of the reason why we throw a bunch of different styles at you guys too. We throw different types of people, different types of majors. We have different types of personalities, so that as you guys engage with different kinds, you're able to process all different kinds of worship, so that when you go to a church that you don't like it, you're still able to worship. Can I tell you another secret? Don't tell the worship teams, okay? We don't always put the most talented people on stage. Sorry, guys. Our emphasis, it's not musical excellence, okay? Our emphasis is about how do you guide people into prayer? How do you help people process where they are with God, not get to a place so that they can meet God? Our emphasis is on worship leading, on guiding prayer through music, so that as you guys walk through your Biola experience, as you guys walk into real life afterward, in church experiences, you have the tools to engage in worship, and also the tools to feed yourself in worship experiences.
Biola University prepares Christians to think biblically about everything, from science to business to education and the arts. Learn more at biola.edu.